Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Youth Destiny Nucleus podcast. Welcome to April's podcast edition. In this month's podcast, we'll be discussing a really interesting topic. The title of our conversation is Adolescents and Self-Destructive Behavior. Adolescents and Self-Destructive Behavior. Sit tight and get ready for an exciting time on the Youth Destiny Nucleus podcast. Welcome back to the Youth Destiny Nucleus podcast. Before we get into the main content of our conversation, I believe it's really important for us to have a scientific background of the average adolescent or teenager's brain before we get into the main content. Now, neuroanatomy will teach that the average brain constitutes four basic lobes. The brain has four lobes: the frontal lobe, the parietal lobe, the temporal lobe, and the occipital lobe. Now, in the frontal lobe of the brain, we have a really important structure there called the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex primarily functions in decision making and impulse control. I would also like us to talk about a very interesting part of your brain, or let's call it a system, the limbic system. The limbic system is a network comprising of three major parts of the brain. Number one, we have the amygdala. The amygdala has a major function of emotional regulation and control, as well as okay, let's leave it at that for now, so we don't turn this into a human anatomy lecture. The second part that comprises the limbic system is the hippocampus. The major function of the hippocampus is in memory formation and retention. We also have the hypothalamus. All right, the hypothalamus controls basic bodily functions like temperature regulation, as well as a bit of emotional control. So the nickname of your prefrontal cortex is actually the decision-making center of the brain. All right, while the limbic system is called the pleasure center of the brain. In your average adolescent or teenager, the decision-making center is still developing. It is still going through a transient phase, meaning that the average teenager doesn't have a fully functional prefrontal cortex. And so that should tell you why the average adolescent struggles to reach logical, decisions. All right, in the absence of a parent or a teenager, a mentor who will guide them or steer them in the right direction, the average teenager struggles to make decisions. It's linked to their biological makeup. On the other hand, the limbic system is fully active and fully functional. The pleasure center of the brain of the average teenager and adolescent is fully functional. I remember talking to a small group of teenagers a couple months ago. I try to emphasize the need for them to be careful the kind of experiments they indulge in. This is because your pleasure center is active, and on the other hand, your prefrontal cortex that is supposed to guide decision making and impulse control is still developing. Okay, now let me issue a disclaimer here. This is not a medical video in any way, and this is equally not trying to imply that teenagers have some medical deficiency or something like that. This is just a function of your natural basic human development. All right, eventually the limbic system and the prefrontal cortex eventually matures quite normally in the absence of any medical problem. Now, how does this affect our conversation today? We are still looking at adolescents and self-destructive behavior. So let's pick apart each of the terminologies as described in the topic itself. So let's begin by defining adolescent. Who is an adolescent or a teenager? An adolescent in the context of our video is one who is between ages 13 and 19. All right, one who is between ages 13 and 19. I would also like to define a teenager as one who is undergoing a fleeting phase of life. When I say fleeting, I'm implying that it's a stage. It's only a stage that is coming to pass. Do you get it now? All right, so what is self-destructive behavior? Self-destructive behavior can be seen as any behavior, any habit, any attitude that brings pleasure in the short term, but in the long run brings negative consequences. All right, let's look at a few examples of self-destructive behavior. Number one, isolation in time of distress or depression, keeping to oneself. Okay, number two, we have an excessive craving for independence and freedom. This also qualifies as self-destructive behavior. Number three, we have lack of consistency. Number four, we have indecisiveness. Today one has decided to be serious, the next day they are changing their mind, and you find them hanging around casually. Self-destructive behavior. Number six, lack of patience. This is one of the major problems a lot of adolescents are grappling with. Lack of patience. We want everything now. The tendency and the craving to want success, to want money, to want affluence, to want power and fame now. It's called lack of patience, and of course it identifies, or it qualifies as self-destructive behavior. Number seven, we have an excessive craving and desire for pleasure. If I look at an average teenager and I'm asked to predict their success or their failure, I will look out for their pleasure quotient. How much affinity do you have for sweet things of life? If you are a kind of person that the moment you discover that something is sweet, something is pleasurable, it gives you butterflies in your belly and you are 100% in for it, then the chances that you end up succeeding, at least to the level or the extent that you should, is quite low. Number eight, we have justifying bad behavior. Number nine, we have lack of vision. If I'm asked to define vision, I'll define vision as a mental picture of your desired outcome, a mental picture of the version of you who has maximized your potential. If you don't have vision, then the likelihood that you'll be great or you accomplish all your goals and your aspirations is next to zero. Number 10, we are still looking at examples of self-destructive behavior, right? Number 10, we have lack of purpose. Your purpose is the reason for your existence. Your driving factor is called your purpose. If you don't have, if you've not quite, figured out what your purpose is in life, then I could also consider that to be self-destructive behavior. Let's look at the reasons for self-destructive behavior. I'm breaking that up into two major headings. Number one, we have the existence of what I'll call blind spots. The existence of blind spots. Now, what do we mean by blind spot? A blind spot is basically a shortcoming, a bad behavior, a bad attitude that you cannot see or identify yourself unless there is a third party. No matter how self-conscious, no matter how well behaved, no matter how no matter how open you are to correction, you cannot see blind spots on your own. Okay, so as teenagers and as adolescents, generally speaking, I believe it's really important for us to understand that at this stage of our lives, we need third parties like teachers, we need third parties like mentors, like spiritual religious leaders, counselors, to identify these blind spots, because they are obviously self-destructive in nature and can impede or obstruct our progress, academically speaking, spiritually speaking, and in several other aspects as well. Number two, the second major reason for self-destructive attitude or tendencies is the biological component, which of course we've been able to trash out at the introductory part of our video. Okay, so self-destructive behavior can lead to poor self-esteem. Okay, when I see someone who has low self-esteem, immediately my mindset is triggered to believe that, okay, this individual is a victim of self-destructive behavior. And self-destructive behavior, on the other hand, can be caused by a few factors like poor parental upbringing, lack of mentorship. Okay, so let's quickly address one particular cause for concern. The next thing that might linger in your mind is, okay, we've been able to establish that these attitudes, these behaviors are not right. They are not all right for our progress. They are not okay for our development and our lives, generally speaking, as teenagers and as adolescents. So the first question is there a way out? And the good news is yes. There are various ways, various applicable strategies to escaping from self-destructive behavior. I'll give you three very quickly. Number one, accountability through mentorship. Accountability through mentorship. Accountability implies identifying someone who you respect, who you revere, and who you honor, and then telling them about your bad behaviors. With accountability, you see that your escape out of self-destructive behavior is guaranteed. I remember having a meeting with a small group of young people not too long ago, and we spoke about addictions, right? Someone lifted up their hands and they were like, okay, sir, I'm struggling with an addiction and it's a mess. Today I'll say I'm out of it, tomorrow I'm back. It's like a relapse, okay? And I tried to point out the elephant in the room to them, and it was obviously a lack of accountability. Addictions and bad behaviors thrive in secrecy. The moment you identify someone who you honor, the moment you identify someone who you revere, you respect, and then you approach them and open up to them concerning that struggle you have, you see that the fear of failing them will keep you within the lines of sanity. Number two, we are looking at escape from self-destructive behavior. The second very powerful tool I'll be recommending to you is utilizing the power of the human will. Utilizing the power of the human will. Now, more often than not, if you find someone failing in life, as a matter of fact, this is a realization I've made not too long ago. I'm not trying to generalize in any way, but from my personal interactions with young people across board, various clients, I've realized that majority of the people who fail in life, they fail not because they don't have access to transformational information. They fail not because they don't have access to orientation and guidance. They fail because they made a choice to fail, whether consciously or subconsciously. They fail because they made a choice, whether good choices or bad choices. All right. So the human will is so powerful that God Almighty himself does not interfere. Okay. For the Christians, of course, you remember the scripture that says, I put before you this day life and death. You have a choice to decide to be practical about escaping from these attitudes, these behaviors that do not serve your visions, do not serve your career, your future in any way. Number three, developing the humility to take corrections. Developing the humility to take corrections. If you are not humble enough to, number one, admit when you are wrong, and then open up your heart to take due correction so you can steer yourself in the direction of success and progress, then you remain pegged at a spot, and the chances of you overcoming or escaping, or better still, defeating this self-destructive behavior is next to zero. All right, thank you so much for sticking with us to this very point of our video. If you are new on our YouTube channel, please do well to hit the subscribe button, turn on the post notification bell. That way you get notified every single time we put out new content. And shout out to all of you who are followers already of our YouTube channel. Thank you so much for the sacrifices you make to see that this vision keeps thriving. I'm going to also ask that you keep looking forward to subsequent podcasts. We have a lineup of very interesting conversations throughout the year 2026. It's going to be really exciting. Trust me. Please share with your friends, share with your classmates, your relatives, your friends, and your acquaintances, and see you around in the next video.